Hi, Rachel. Thanks so much for being with me.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I hear you advise policymakers around the world on
Yeah.
AI governance.
Yes.
Why AI?
Well, I fell into AI a few years ago. I was very interested in some of the big ideas, particularly policy ideas that seem to be presented as universal, but often fail to take into account the very different contexts and needs and priorities on the African continent. And AI was one of those issue areas where a few years ago it came to prominence, and I was concerned that African leaders were not part of the conversation. So my work is really about thinking about how does AI help the African continent, how does it potentially hinder the African continent, and what kind of policy and governance approaches do we need to look to a more equitable and just future for the continent.
Right. How does AI help the African continent?
Well, I think part of the way it does this is in terms of its connection with the youth. Africa has, of course, a massive and growing, fast-growing youth population, and so much of our youth is connected to the internet and social media, and it's probably the generation, the kind of digital-first generation, that's most likely to feel ready and connected to use artificial intelligence technologies. So I think it's a little bit underexplored. At the moment we're thinking about AI for health, AI for education, which is important, AI for agriculture. These are really important areas, and I think there's a lot of good work being done to figure out what kind of innovations we can and need in this space. But I think there's probably a set of new economies that we haven't thought very much about that maybe and probably our youth will drive, and it will be on social media and through kind of entertainment and content development and so forth. So I'm excited for those kinds of futures.
Tell me more about like your background. I know you said you grew up in South Africa, or your kids are South African,
Yeah.
and why did Africa become your place to do service and make an impact?
Well, I grew up in the UK, and I went to Ghana at quite a young age and was blown away by the country and how dynamic and alive and exciting the place was. And I think after that I just thought this is a continent that will probably intrigue and interest me for the rest of my life. And very quickly I moved to South Africa, and I went to South Africa to study human rights, but very quickly met my husband, who is from a really interesting community in South Africa. It was one of the only non-white communities not to be forcibly removed from the center of the city of Cape Town. And it's an interesting Muslim community. So I was really kind of interested in this community historically, but also in its future within this incredibly diverse continent. And we've since had 4 kids, so
Nice. So
I'm
South African, so there you go.
so there we go. Yeah.
Nice. So I
Yeah.
have a question though. So as someone who was raised outside of the continent,
Yeah.
went to the continent for, I guess, for a visit, and then stayed in the continent, what would you tell other people? Like, what did you see? What did you saw the potential then, and now you saw how you can now be involved in that potential. What did you see, and what would you want to tell other people?
I'm not sure what I saw, but I think I know what I felt. And I think it was a kind of dynamism and energy that just felt more at the cutting edge of what the world was really about and the world was really going to. We are going to be moving towards a far more diverse global future.
Right.
And I think so much of that diversity comes from the African continent. And I think this is the kind of connection with artificial intelligence. AI has a diversity issue.
Yes.
It is a kind of white man's technology, and we're trying to figure out how to make it work for everybody.
Yes.
And I think this is where Africa has the kind of reserves of potential and inclusion and diversity that can change the face of this technology that is really supposed to be at the forefront of our global future.
Nice. So I know that you care so much about AI. You even wrote a book about it. The same thing. So you have so many hats, and we are so grateful for you to being involved with understanding how to better govern AI on the continent.
Thank you.
Which brings me to my last question. When you look back 30 years from now, and people are talking about Rachel and what impact she made in Africa, what do you want them to say?
Oh my gosh, that's a huge question. I think really that I've supported and enabled others to work in this space. I think technology can be a very elitist space. It can be a space where not a lot of women feel welcome. And I'd like to work to change that and bring much more kind of representation into the global debates and decision making about artificial intelligence. And I think globally we need to hear from African voices, particularly women.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thanks for being with me.
Thank
And thanks for being with
you.
us at Unstoppable Africa.